Mark, just let me know when you're ready.
It just makes sense. There's a lot like I can think a lot of times like it's
Okay.
too.
Welcome everyone to the Tuesday, May 14th, 2024 work study meeting. If we could all stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amy, if we could have a roll call.
Director Asner?
Here.
Director Muller?
Here.
Director Sartorius?
Here.
Director Suda?
Here.
Director Staten? Here. Vice President Cuneo?
Here.
And President Patel.
Here. Before we start our monthly SSD Board of Education work study, I would like to take a moment to remind the audience and the directors of the board on the work study process. The work study is the time to receive information from the SSD leaders. We have 20 minutes set aside for each presentation and 20 minutes for the Board of Education to ask questions. If there is an event where we're approaching the 20-minute marker, I will alert the group when there's 5 minutes left. We ask that at that time the presenter finish up in the allotted time or the Board of Directors asking questions to finalize their questions. This is in respect for all Board of Directors and the SSD leadership. Fine. Thank you. First on our agenda is 2.01 FY 2025 budget presentation.
Good evening. Thanks for having me back. Dr. Macklin has asked that I help share the preliminary budget presentation with you. In doing so, I thought it might be wise to just hit on the budget process, some of the things. I know each of you probably deal with it in your individual businesses and places of work, but there are some things unique to the school budget cycle. So I thought I'd go over those a little bit and then get into more of exactly what's been going on here at SSD. So first of all, I think it's important to understand that budget documents are really compliance. They are roadmaps for planning and really should be a reflection of the priorities of the district. So as they're built out, I think it's important that you understand one, you have to do it for a compliance sake. And then from there, it really becomes a planning tool. DESE's website states a few things that I'll just read here real quickly. A school budget is an instrument that provides a definite financial policy for direction of the business operations of a school district. It provides a detailed outline of the probable expenditures and anticipated revenues. The budget is one of the most important legal documents of the school district. It is not a static document, but rather a working document. The budgeting cycle, preparation, adoption, implementation, operation, control, and evaluation is a continuous process, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. Preparation for the next fiscal year must be carried on while implementation, operation, control, and evaluation of the current budget is still being completed. And then I think one of the things that's important, and I've been working with Cynthia and Linda Quinley has been as well. There is a statute that requires that a budget amendment shall be made stating reasons in the board minutes prior to actual expenditures for a given fund exceeding the officially approved budget. So in other words, when you approve the budget at the beginning of the year, you give authority for the district to spend money out of, in your case, 3 distinct funds, operations, teacher fund, and the capital projects fund. By statute, the school district is not allowed to spend more money in any one of those 3 funds than what has been previously approved. So a lot of times what happens in districts is they will approve something during the year that wasn't in the original budget. So the board has approved an item that is obviously going to extend the budget, but until that amendment is made, it is not technically official. So as we work on the amended budget here at the end of the year, it's important to remember that part of that is a compliance issue, just getting that money into the correct fund. So basically right now, there are 3 different levels of work that is going on. Dr. Macklin, the leadership team, the Board of Education, they're making decisions right now that are going to impact the 2025 budget, the expenditures that are going to be made. So as you all are making those decisions, working through those processes, Cynthia and her team are trying to build out that 25 budget to match those decisions, okay? The second level that is going on right now is Cynthia digging in at a granular level with the help of Ms. Quinley to really dig in and see what has happened in 24. Was the budget close? What amendments need to be made to make it correct? And at the same time, if we ended up with a budget line item last year that we didn't have any expenditures for, where did that get expended and how do we correct that moving into 2025? And then the work that I'm doing is as an outsider looking in at kind of a broad looking at trends. Is it reasonable? Where are some things where traps are usually at, where things get missed? And so by doing that, we can kind of put all 3 of those things together and come up with a budget. So I think before we look at the details a little bit more, I just want to take a second to help highlight the work that Cynthia and her team are doing right now. I know what it's like to dig into a $60 million budget with a few thousand line items. This is a $600 million budget that she is being asked to take on responsibility for here with a fairly short period of time to get after it. And the amount of work that her and Ms. Quinley have been doing is just incredible work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over for the next slide.
Good evening. The information you have before you is the overarching information for our budget. As you know, when we plan for the budget, our focus is always looking at it from the lens of a zero-based budget. So where do we start? We look at what's needed, those wants, as well as enhancements, and that's what you see here. The 3 bulleted items that you see to your right, these are the tiers that we support districts throughout the county. The first one would be what we do for everyone. So that's all countywide partner districts, SSD schools and programs, the operations of the district. When we begin to talk about that second tier, that is disproportionality. And that's where we support our partner districts that have been identified at some point in time as being disproportionate. And we work with each of those districts to support them with developing goals as well as action plans to support the funds that they receive. It is our responsibility as the funding source for special education funds to support each of those partner districts. And so we do set aside 15% of our IDEA Part B, if I am correct, funds to support those districts. We meet with them annually. We have these conversations through the budget process, as well as establishing memorandums of understanding with each of these districts. These districts are supported through resources, instructional materials, professional development, as well as staffing. They have the autonomy to make decisions as to see what they see as needed within each of their school communities, and we support the work that they have to advance and move forward. When we look at tier 3, that is where we have identified districts through the Distressed Communities Index. And this is where we support districts at another level. What in addition can we do? Some of these districts may be disproportionate and some may not, but we have more extensive conversation with them to support additional needs that may support the current status of their districts and to improve the outcomes of students. It's also important to remember and understand that those disproportionate funds are used outside of the special education setting. And there are often times when these funds can support in a special education setting. Those statuses are identified by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and then we are then to inform those districts of the status and how they can utilize those funds.
Good evening. We have highlighted several individual expense object codes for you. Our 6311 account is instruction services. That's where Kelly Services is coded to. We have seen an increase in substitute costs. And this includes substitutes filling vacancies as well as substitutes covering for leaves such as birth of a child or bereavement leave. Our 6341 and 6552 are transportation related. This increase includes Student Transportation of America for North Garage and anticipated increases for third-party providers such as Zip Care, EMT, and Axle Transportation. Our 6316 is the data processing services. This is mainly due to, increase there is mainly due to our Lawson N41 system. 6412 are supplies technology related. This number is higher than in years past because of the many items we purchased during COVID that need to be refreshed this year. But we will be seeing some savings here as we move from purchase to lease devices next year. 6371 is our dues and memberships account. The substantial increase in this area is a result of the changes to the joint resolutions that now have the district covering certain certification costs. And lastly, 6333, we are experiencing a decrease next year because we are no longer paying the lease for Central Bus Garage.
Okay, so I think to reiterate earlier comments, Cynthia and Linda have really been digging in and trying to find the discrepancies, find where the spending is in those line items. I know Steve has been doing a significant amount of work on the revenue side as well to not only project out for the rest of this year, but to take a look into next year. Going into next year, we're aware that we have contractual agreements already in place through IEPs, different things. So we have to be conscious of that. I think going into FY26, there will be some heavy lifting to do at that point to talk about those things that we discussed last time I was here. So these next two slides, the revenue slide and the expenditure slide, were put together a week or so ago to make it into your board packets. That work is ongoing. It will continue through this week as they prepare next meeting's work. So I say that to say that these numbers are still fluid at this point because they are working to make sure that they are correct. Having said that, I will say part of what my duty was to take a look at them from a different lens. And so for the revenue side, for the FY24 adjusted budget that you see there, talking specifically about the operations side, which 562 million includes capital. So you take that out, there's about 536 million in operating expenses revenues in the FY24 adjusted budget. When we were doing our work, when I was first called, we started digging in immediately. What is FY24 possibly going to look like? And we started building out a master plan for the next 5 years. When I take the number that we came up with at that point in time, the number off of this slide that's being prepared and really dug into by Steve here on site. And then I take the projection model that I shared with you last time that takes trends over the last 5 years, applies it to this year's data and projects out what the end of the year would be. I can tell you those three numbers are within 1.5% of each other, which would indicate that we're pretty close on what the FY24 revenues will be. Approaching it the same way with the expenditure slide, I came up with, in the master plan, we had about 577 million operating expenses. 581 is what you see on this slide, which is the total expenditures there of 603 minus the line above it, which is capital. So you get to 581 million. And then the projection model would indicate that we're going to end up somewhere around 579 million. So those are even tighter bunched. Those are about within 2/3 of 1% of each other. Again, just three different ways of looking at the same scenario and trying to make sure that we're somewhat close in our projections. So I feel good about those. That would leave SSD with a fund balance of this year somewhere around 54%, which is not too far off of what we had projected. As far as the FY25 budget, the initial projections are based upon the current data that we have. I know that these numbers are going to be updated as Dr. Macklin goes through the rest of those decisions that have to be made, that I mentioned, that tier 1 level of decision-making that you all are going to have to do between now and the end of the year. Yeah, I believe it is Cynthia's intention to have something, though, ready by Friday of this week that would go into your packet. That is a quick overview of what your team here has been doing and my look from an oversight standpoint kind of at their work. I guess we would ask for questions at this point.
Just, I don't want to get into the weeds on this. I just got a quick question. Explain to me, maybe I'm reading this wrong. On subscriptions and publications, that's a 1,700% increase. Is that figure correct?
Which line item?
It is the line item 6451. I was just trying to figure out why. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just trying to figure out why it went up 1,700%.
Are you looking at the detailed expenditures?
requested FY25 budget line
Yeah,
item
for-
versus the previous year's expenditures.
I was just trying to figure, I mean, that's a pretty good size
Yes, it
increase.
is. I'll have to look into it and I can get you that information.
I mean, all the rest seem pretty
Yes.
much in order, but that one just kind of, none, I mean, that's way beyond what it's ever been. And the increases, like I said, it's 17 times what it was before. I was just curious why.
Okay, I can get you that information. When this report was run, that was what was in the budget at that time at 422, that was in the system. So these numbers will be changing, but I can
No,
find
I,
out for you.
it just seems, it's a striking increase when everyone else is of the same. And all of a sudden, within 10%, 15%, this one's 1,700%.
Right, we'll check into it. Okay.
Another
Any other
question for you.
question? Okay.
This is the first line item, 6311.
Yes.
You're projecting $7 million for the FY25. That's substantially lower than we've been.
Yes, that was just what was in the system at the time when this was run. We're gonna add a substantial amount
Okay.
more to that for this year's budget as well, the adjusted budget this year and for next year. Okay.
Hi,
Hi.
just a real quick question. I'm trying to get my head around disproportionate districts and these districts. Is there an overlap there? How many districts are we helping support with this funding?
We have 11 of the 22 districts that are identified that we're supporting through disproportionate funds. And then through the tier 3, when you look at the high needs districts, it's 8 districts total, and some of them do overlap. I want to say, I believe it's 6 of those 8 are also disproportionate.
So 6 additional fund, those
Additional
six
funds, correct.
districts are getting additional funds
That is correct.
for that area. And then I had another quick question.
Just to clarify, because I'm not sure if I finished the question right.
Yeah.
In addition to the disproportionality funds, there are also tier 3 supports. So that means that 6 of those 8 are receiving additional funds in addition to the disproportionality.
That is
Right.
correct.
It's just want to make sure it's.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I wanted to kind of get out and see. And then we were talking about a fund balance projection for the end of the year. We're looking at 55%. 54.
Yeah.
But that doesn't account long range, what's going to happen
No.
to our fund balance, given negotiations and things like that, right? So that 54% that we have currently projected will be affected by whatever happens
Yes, sir.
with negotiations and everything to be affected.
Correct. I think if you go back to that document, and I don't have it right in front of me, but I think you'll find the 54 this year is really close to what we projected. Moving into next year, we're probably going to be a little bit lower than that original projection because we've got some things that are carrying over we're going to have to take care of, which will just mean we have to be a little bit more aggressive in FY26 and moving forward to rescue that trend line that we were looking at.
So, and I think when we talk about, the 54% being at 54, really 52, 54 is kind of right where we wanted to be, that projection piece to go from there. I think we're right at looking at the end of FY25, if nothing's done. So that means that there is no move in capital projects. There is no reallocation of staff. I think we'll probably be around 42%. But I think, again, and being able to level out the balance from those pieces from there, I think, remember, we started at 73%, right? And so if you remember from where we started from, I think those pieces are key. But I think we're pretty much right on 54, 52 from the projections there. I think also the 6311 and at the Governing Council presentation, Kevin Andert really spoke to those pieces just regarding, 6311 at one point was budgeted at $8 million, and that's really where the Kelly Services is taken from. And then that $8 million was cut in half. And that's why you see that FY22 is right around 4.9 or $4 million, right? And really that skyrocketed. So we truly understand right now that it says $7 million, but we're projected from that Kelly Services to be about 14 million in that, just with all of the many aspects that have taken place last year into this year.
I have a question, and you may have said it, and I saw something shiny and didn't hear it. When do you hope to have the actual 24 budget numbers locked in, concrete, good to go?
We are going to turn all of that information in by this Friday.
Oh,
Yes,
fabulous.
for the next board meeting on the 28th.
Because on May 28th will be the approval of it or what that looks like, right? So, and we're right on pace with those pieces. I know Dr. Cummins has really given Cynthia and her team a lot of praise, but also Kevin and Kelly, who are behind you, you'll hear from later today, have done a great job just with those pieces. So we're really on pace with those pieces and have identified just about plug and play right now.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so thank you for the presentation and the work you're doing. You did mention that we need board approval for expenditures over budget. Do we need to do anything else to be in compliance? Or has that been happening along the way?
As far as explain the other things that maybe I'm not thinking about, because I guess what I'm saying is during the course of the year, let's take, for instance, the Kelly Services that Doc was talking about. We go into the year with an expectation that X is going to happen. Well, based upon decisions that were made and contracts and those things, now all of a sudden we have an escalation of those expenses. That's not an expense that as a board, we can just say, well, the budget was 4 million, we're not paying, and we have to continue to pay that. So at some point in time, there has to be a budget adjustment with a explanation to the board that here is what happened, here's why we're doing this. Another scenario would be you get into the year and I don't know, you find you can buy pencils for half price and you buy 2 million pencils. And the board makes that decision to take advantage of that. That was not something that was budgeted, but now we're going to have those pencils. And so at the end of the year, boards do it differently. I will say this, some make budget amendments monthly, some make budget amendments quarterly, some make them in May, and basically make it a compliance issue, which we know we're going to spend 300 million in Fund 1. We need to make our budget match 300 million, so we're in compliance. So there's several different ways that boards go about it. But the bottom line is if the audit comes in at the end of the year and has $301 million spent out of Fund 1, we need to have budgeted at least $301 million in Fund 1. So typically you will make your last budget amendment will be a little bit excessive just to make sure that you're covered. And then you'll get the actuals are going to be what they are. But you want the budget to be compliant.
Thank you. And then that has to happen, of course, in cooperation with the governing council.
Yeah.
In this particular district. Okay, thank you for that answer. And then I have another question. So I know we had a lot of unanticipated expenses and we're discovering those and seeing those roll forward. We're spending a lot at this point at Kelly Services. I don't know if that's something that we've thought about, whether or not it makes any sense to bring any of those kinds of things in-house. And I'm really not asking for an answer right now. I'm just asking the question whether or not we would be more efficient if we would bring something like that under roof and in-house, just because of the incredible increase in that area. I see we're spending 10% of our budget on purchase services.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Food for thought.
yeah, being able to take a look at those pieces. I know Joanne Suden, when she asked a question, she asked it so that it's on the record. And so I think that those pieces we can take a look at for all possibilities.
Appreciate that.
I have a question. I'm just trying to reconcile numbers. So as I was listening to the projected fund balance, and I know we've seen this somewhere between 57 and 54-ish numbers, and we're narrowing that down, 54, 52. But when I look at the projected numbers from the governing council meeting, I'm looking specifically at slide 34, and it's the result of righting the ship. And those percentages are at 45.85. So I'm just what is the difference in those projected numbers versus these projected numbers?
Well, when you look at the riding the ship, those pieces have a capital piece that was in there.
Thank you.
And I think also when you look at, because what Director Carmen is referencing is really how we're going to write the fund balance, starting from 73 to those pieces compared to 41% to down to 29. So that's a huge piece. I think also when you look at slide 34, it also attributes to the changes that will be made to the fund balance. So those pieces are attributed there.
Thanks. I knew it was something I was missing, for sure.
Any other questions?
I think also Dr. Cuneo asked a question about 6541. And one of the items from negotiations last year really spoke to now paying for certifications. And so now that we are paying for certifications, that is where our stipends are coded. And so that's why you see the large increase in 6451, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's certifications?
6451, yes,
Okay.
yes.
That makes sense.
64, I'm sorry, 6451, yes,
Yeah, and this applies to all that are 63.
yes.
Oh.
Well, and I think you wouldn't typically see, Kelly Services in instructional services, 6311, but that's where we house those also. So I think some of those line items could be different. Director Mullen?
Right next to that, the 6531, can I ask about the jump from actual 24 to the requested budget?
What number? I'm sorry.
6531,
Wow.
it's 1.5. We'll jump to
That's that one.
1.8. Improvements other than buildings, what?
Yes, that's a capital item that would be part of our maintenance
That
budget.
makes sense.
And what,
Yes.
what,
They include items such as like, maybe a pavement for playgrounds or, roofing. I would have to look into it to see exactly what the jump is.
So one of those increases is from that item, as I'll just give you an example, is that we were going to do and I call it restriping, but I know that's not the technical term for it. Restriping of North Tech. And just because of where that came place, the timing was not applicable. And so it got to the winter and we couldn't do it in the winter because of where those pieces were. And so you put that back on for the fall for those pieces. Typically, as you can see there, the 3 million is there, but really even over the next 4 years, we're scheduled for about 1.5, but that's where those pieces are.
The 3 million was probably because of the playgrounds that year.
I also just want to clarify that 6371 and 6451 jumped up because of the bargaining agreement.
yeah, that's what I was pointing out.
Yeah, because it just lists one on here, but it should be both.
Both are due to the.
Yes.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda, we've got 2.02 NSIP monitoring report presentation.
Innovation waiver?
Yeah, innovation waiver plan.
Should we go to 2.03?
We're in two.
2.02?
Skipped it.
Innovation waiver?
It's switched here from our.
Oh, you're
actual-
tricking me.
Oh.
Which one do you want me to go to?
Who wants to go?
Okay.
All right. Innovation waiver.
All right, 2.03 innovation waiver plan overview.
All right, good evening, President Bottrov, Board of Directors, Dr. Macklin. I'm Kevin Andrew, Executive Director of Career and Technical Education and College and Career Readiness. And presenting with me this evening is Dr. Kelly Grigsby, who is our Executive Director of Schools and Programs. And we're going to be providing information about the innovation waiver that we are seeking to pursue as a district. So first, what is an innovation waiver? So this is a relatively new thing. It was established in August of 2021 by the Senate, Senate Bill 285. The intention of that legislation was to foster innovation in schools and allow school districts, and it actually could go all the way down to the individual school building level, to be exempted from certain pieces of either state regulation or statute as it applies to schools to allow you to do something new and innovative to have a positive impact. And there's a couple different parameters that it falls under, and we're going to talk about that here in a moment. A waiver can last for up to 3 years, and then that waiver can be renewed on an annual basis after that initial 3-year approval. And so the couple buckets that an innovation waiver can fall into, there's really three main criteria. It needs to fit one of those three. Two of them center around teachers, either retention of teachers or compensation for teachers. Our plan focuses on the first bullet, which is increased student college and career readiness is the focus of our plan. It dovetails into a little bit, if you remember Dr. Bolton's presentation last meeting where we talked about APR and where the district is with accreditation. We're looking to dig into that piece. The innovation plan has to be developed by an innovation team. You have to create accountability targets that'll be measured and reported to our board as well as the state. We have to have the support of the community. That includes families, employees, industry, as well as our Board of Education. And then within that proposal, we have to identify the laws, rules, or regulations that we are asking to be exempted from.
Good evening. Thank you. Why now? Well, last time we met, Molly came up and talked to you about our data. It was pretty dismal, but we also provided some explanations for that. So we take a standard accreditation model and apply it to the most unique, diverse learners we have in our school district, and it doesn't fit. So we're looking for a way to hold ourselves accountable, to encourage student growth, and to encourage accountability for our staff, but to measure that in a meaningful way using data that really does show our students' abilities and how they're growing. We also want an opportunity to align with our current CISA process, which we're all working on as a district, and it really just makes sense. So we came together, we have an innovation team, and the team is representations from, Kevin and I are leading the team, but the team has representation from all of our different stakeholder groups with regards to the district. So SSD schools are represented, including the Juvenile Detention Center. We have Casey Wisdom, who is representing transition across the district, but specifically for our schools. Technical education, because that is impacted as well. And then we have the curriculum and assessment component through our curriculum coordinator and assessment facilitator. So our innovation waiver will cover two specific areas, performance and continuous improvement. Within performance, we're talking about success-ready students, how we look at graduation follow-up, and academic achievement. We'll talk a little bit more about that moving forward to this presentation. With regards to continuous improvement, where we're always looking to improve attendance, career readiness, and then post-secondary planning.
So our first target area that we want to dig into is success-ready students. That's specifically in the performance area. Currently, in the MSIP 6 framework, the way that that's measured is through assessments like the ACT, the SAT, work keys, or college credit attainment. We want to shift the focus away from that and instead to something more meaningful that we're going to see a greater impact for our students. And that's work-based learning, or what's referenced as WBL. There's a substantial amount of research, especially Ross et al.'s article in 2020 that was part of Brookings Institute's research that talks about how work-based learning is that piece that creates equity for all learners. It's getting the student from out of the classroom environment and exposed to the world of work in a variety of different ways. That can be simulated work experiences, that can be school-based enterprises like coffee shops or coffee carts. That can also be structured opportunities outside of school. That could be internships. That could be what we do with community-based vocational instruction. There's a lot of different ways that you can do meaningful work-based learning. And they've identified in that Brookings research really 8 key tenets to high-quality work-based learning. And a lot of that centers on it being a meaningful opportunity for the student, tied back to what they're doing curricularly, giving them meaningful interactions with adults, and having it be on an ongoing, recurring basis over their K-12 educational experience. And so our target with this is to have 90% of our graduates complete 60 hours or more of high quality work-based learning. The state of Illinois identified that 60-hour threshold as really the cut mark to be considered a career development course. Other than that, prior to that, it's really more of exposure and introduction. But once you hit that 60-hour mark, that student has really been exposed to the world beyond school and is able to make those meaningful connections to prepare them to transition to life after high school. So that's what we're looking to look at through a different lens when we're talking about student performance. And then Graduate follow-up. So this is one that we do currently. It's our 180-day follow-up. So it's done 6 months after graduation. We want to expand the interpretation of positive student placement. If you recall, we have a CSIT team that was working around the definition of what is a positive post-school outcome. They've developed a much broader interpretation, recognizing the diverse learner population that we serve. So right now, DESE has a very narrow focus. It's either college, world of work, or military, or volunteer experience through AmeriCorps or the Peace Corps. And that's really it of what our students are limited to. And for work, it's got to be 20 hours or more of work experience, and it's got to be in competitive work. We want to shift that interpretation to what the CSIT team's work generated, which is a much more holistic interpretation of a positive post-school outcome. So we want to expand that to include work that's less than part-time employment, include non-competitive employment, because for many of our students, that is the most, that's the best post-secondary outcome for that student. We want to include volunteering. We have a lot of our students who are participating in volunteering experiences, and then also add in a component that centers around family guardian satisfaction. So not only are we tracking what the student's outcome is post-high school, but then also what's that family satisfaction level with that placement. And what we're proposing is that we've got to meet both of those marks. We have to both meet our definition of a positive post-school outcome and have family satisfaction with that placement. Our proposed target is that 70% or more of our graduates achieve a positive post-school outcome 180 days after graduation. So we're looking to make a broader interpretation. We still believe that follow-up is important. We want to track it, but we want to be tracking the things that are meaningful for the students that we serve.
We are also going to look at graduation rate. As we learned in our presentation last time around graduation rate, we have the only thing that counts as graduation at this time is graduation by earning credits. In our schools, on average, about 27% of our students graduate earning credits. It varies from school to school based on the student population. In some schools, we have higher numbers of students in our social emotional behavior programs. Typically, those students do graduate earning credits. In some of our other schools, we have higher populations of students with multiple disabilities or autism. Many times those are our students who graduate with IEP goals. So what we are proposing is that as a district, we look at graduation not only through the lens of earning credits, but also through the meeting of IEP goals, which would cover more of our students. It's also more realistic for many of our students. It wouldn't change the decision whether IEP teams are making a decision for goals or credits, but it would give us an opportunity to recognize that our students are graduating as far as how we recognize that, even though the state doesn't recognize it in that way. With regards to academic achievement, Molly and Matt talked about the difference between status, which is achievement. Are students achieving on their grade level? Are they working close to their same age peers who are working on grade level? And then growth. And growth was based, remember, on a model, a formula that's created at Mizzou, takes in a lot of components, disability, socioeconomics, a litany of challenging, I couldn't explain it to you, components. But basically what it's measuring is if we take all of these predictors, are our students growing at a rate that we would expect them to grow as they're taking state assessments? That's the MAP test, end of course exams, and our DLM. We consistently exceed that metric, so our students are achieving at a rate higher than predicted. We would like to continue to do that. We recognize that academic achievement is highly important, what we're here for. But we need to measure in a way that honors our students, their differences, and also honors the work that our staff are putting into making sure our students grow. So we're proposing that we still take assessments and still monitor our work on achievement on those assessments, but really focus on the growth we're making as compared to the prediction models.
Right. And then the next piece for success ready students, there's also a continuous improvement component. And there's a couple places we want to address here. First is attendance. So attendance is an area where our students traditionally struggle. When you recognize the populations that we serve, we have a high concentration of students who are medically fragile. We also have a high concentration of students with some pretty substantial mental challenges that might result in additional absences tied to social emotional regulation. And so we feel that attendance is really trying to measure what is student engagement. And so instead of looking at attendance as our only way to measure student engagement, we think course completion and course success is a better metric for the student populations that we serve. So instead of looking at how many days was the student physically present? We want to look at how many of our students successfully complete the courses that they attempt, and that be our measure of student engagement. Recognizing that from the state, attendance is still going to be a piece that matters because it factors into funding. That's part of our average daily attendance. That's not going to change with this proposal. But for an accreditation standpoint, we want to look at another lens besides just, is the student physically there, but are they engaged in learning? Are they passing the courses that they're attempting? We think that's really, when you look at the spirit of what DESE's trying to measure here, it is that student engagement piece. And a student can be physically present and not engaged in learning. We want to focus on, are they engaged? Are they learning? Two new measures that we want to add that are not currently present in the MSIP 6 model center around career readiness and post-secondary planning. First is we want students to complete a career readiness assessment. If you remember when I talked about the performance piece, used to include, the ACT, the SAT, work keys, and a lot of those were used to determine career readiness. We don't want to have a set cut score for that, but we want to use it as a planning tool so that all of our students are participating in intentional career planning. Be that our school to work continuum assessment, be that the work keys assessment to see, are they on track for what their plan is post high school? And then on top of that, we want to add in a post-secondary planning component, which is the Charting the Life course trajectory tool that helps the student put all of those pieces together of, am I on track to achieve my plan post-high school? And so we can start making sure that we've got the pieces and supports in place. Northview is one of our schools already that's really embraced Charting the Life course and is using it very actively with their students across the board for that intentional career planning. We're seeing a strong benefit to that. It's impacting 180-day follow-up. It's impacting parent satisfaction. We see that as a best practice that we really want to make systemic across the board in all of our schools and programs. So you see 3 proposed targets there. The first one is 90% of our students will earn 90% of the credits or courses attempted. The second, for career readiness assessment, will be administered to 90% or more of our graduating seniors. We recognize that we have a fairly mobile student population, and that's why we think the 90% threshold is the most appropriate. We don't think that we'll ever be able to hit 100% there with all students, knowing that they're coming and going. And then third is that Charting the Life course trajectory tool is completed by 90% or more of our graduating seniors. We think that this really centers our resources around making sure every student has a solid plan and the supports they need to move on to whatever that plan is post high school. So our next steps. So we have a few more pieces to do. We were doing some additional stakeholder feedback. Dr. Grigsby actually had a session this morning with some staff to get some stakeholder feedback. So we're getting feedback from our families, our staff, and our community around this initial proposal and seeing what's resonating and then what are some things that might need further clarification. Additionally, we'll need board approval for this plan. So this is a work study. We're not asking for board approval this evening. What we're bringing you is really kind of our rough draft is where we're at. We're going to continue to refine that based off the feedback that we're receiving. We've also been in communication with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They're the end recipient of this plan after it's approved by the board. We've had some back and forth with them, and we're going to be making some tweaks and edits to the plan that you've received to this point based off their feedback. A lot of it's going to be more around the structure. The content is going to be somewhat similar, but we're going to change the structure of the document. And then the last piece is it would need to go to the State Board of Education for approval. They would give initial approval, and then annually we'd have to bring back the plan to them each year to give an update of where we at as far as working towards the target measures that we've identified. And then at the end of the 3 years, it would be requesting to renew the innovation if we believe that that's in the best interest of the district. And Director Suda, I know you had a question about the Northview graduation rate and kind of what Dr. Grigsby had touched on. Northview has a higher concentration of SEB students, and therefore they have more students graduating on credit. So that's why we did see that piece in the numbers. We just want to make sure we address that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions?
What are non-competitive?
Yeah. So non-competitive employment could be supported employment. That might mean there might be a job coach that's present. It might be one where they're just not competing against other people for the position. It could be more of a segmented type of employment, supported. Kelly, you want to talk a little bit about the places where we've had?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, we work directly with agencies that supply job coaches. So a non-competitive employment would be like a job created for a student, graduate. Maybe something that you're not necessarily replacing the work that really is required, but you're learning, you're on there, you're receiving support. So it's not competitive employment in that you're going up against someone else with regards to applying for a job and position.
Makes sense.
I want to offer some community feedback since it's the next step.
Yeah.
Speaking of that graduate follow-up outcomes, I would consider adding placement in an adult daycare program as a positive post-school outcome. Since that one is not, I think, specifically addressed as.
Yeah, so we didn't call it out on the PowerPoint, but if you do look, are you looking at the supporting document that was in board documents? So if you go into the supporting document, it has the full myriad list. And it does include an adult day program. If that is, and that's where that parent satisfaction piece comes in, that family guardian satisfaction is because for some students, that is the most appropriate, where they're working on those social development skills. It's really about, is the student having that positive impact on their community? And that can happen in a variety of places and spaces.
Thank you. And then what's our backup plan if the state board does not approve this request?
So lather, rinse, repeat is the plan. And so- but our plan is to continue to work with the state and continue to adjust. Currently, there is only one innovation waiver that's been approved in the state, so this is still a really new thing. It hasn't existed for more than 3 years. And so they're kind of feeling their way through this process too of what is exactly the mark that you're looking for. So we're anticipating some back and forth potentially as we work through this. We are confident that once we have support of our board, we have additional stakeholder feedback, and we do some structural changes with how the document's formatted. We think that we're pretty confident that this is something that the state can get on board with.
Should we be doing some lobbying at the state senate level to try to have an exception made to this law that was passed? Because it doesn't, I mean, is that something that we're looking at as well?
Okay. Okay.
Otherwise,
meet with
we'll
our
be,
lobbyists.
we'll be asking for, exceptions to our accreditation. Sounds like in 3 years, then again, after that.
Yeah. Last time we went down the road of trying to legislate changes to the district's accreditation, there were some challenges. And the challenge wasn't that there was support. When you explain the district, the nature of the district, the problem was it was universally popular. And so charter school expansion ended up getting tacked on to that bill that was seeking to change district accreditation. It's one of those things that because everyone likes it, they want to attach other pieces of less relevant legislation that's not always in the best interest of public education.
Is that a poison pill that killed it?
That time, yes. Yeah, they went from a 2-page piece of legislation to 147.
Okay. That makes sense.
With the goal of getting sufficient feedback from our stakeholders in the community, what are you aiming for? What's in your mind would meet? What number are you
speak to
looking
that
for?
because I've already held
Success on that, yeah.
So we've invited representatives from all of our schools, families from all of our schools. We've had some participation. We have people that are interested but are not necessarily able to meet our scheduled listening sessions. All of the feedback we've received has been very positive. They are very excited about an opportunity to have measurements and data that is meaningful for their student. The staff are thrilled. It's disheartening to consistently look at data that feels not applicable to the work that they're doing. It's disheartening to know that they're working their tails off. Probably an appropriate thing to say, yet it is the truth every day. And it's not replicated in the data that we're currently collecting. So the opportunity to really look at meaningful data that supports the work that we're doing and continue to grow that, they are 100% on board. So they're excited about this opportunity and they feel like they can't wait and hope that the board will support it and also the state. So I didn't answer your question with regards to a threshold. We are going to do everything we can to engage the community. But the feedback we've received so far has been very positive.
And then on the industry side, when you talk about the employer perspective, this kind of worked out well that this year is a year that we do our Perkins Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment for Career and Technical Education, where we dig into what does the world of work in St. Louis need. And overwhelmingly, the piece that they're looking for is young people more involved in the world of work. How do we better connect them and better prepare them for that transition? So that's how that work-based learning piece became a key part of this plan and proposal, was it was really identified by our employers of this is what we need. We need more young people who are ready to transition into the world of work. And that comes from exposure, that comes from greater understanding. And the only way to do that is to get students out of the classroom and into that world of work so they can see firsthand what does it take to be successful.
to me, a couple flags pop up. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I'm curious about the attendance,
Mhm.
you know, because if the world of work requires showing up on a daily
Sure.
basis to kind of
Yeah.
move the goalposts, you know, back a little bit on that is a bit concerning.
Yeah.
And the graduation.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, can you address?
Yeah, so can I talk about both those pieces? So the attendance piece, part of the reason why we wanted to change it for the accreditation component is because it's still going to be counted for average daily attendance. So it's not a metric that we're not going to pay attention to. We still very much want to hold students to the expectation of 90% or above attendance. At the same time, recognizing the populations of students that we serve, for some students, that's just not going to be an achievable metric for them. And there's not a way around that. And so instead of saying we want to be exempted from accreditation, from having attendance be a part of accreditation, not replace it with anything else, we wanted to replace it with that academic engagement piece. So course completion, successfully passing courses, because even if a student physically isn't at school, they are able to engage in that learning outside of school, where students can do learning activities at home and those pieces. And so that's why we landed there. But we still believe attendance is very important and we want students to physically be present, and it's still going to factor into funding. So we absolutely are paying attention to attendance, but we don't think it should be the piece driving the bus for accreditation of our district.
Kevin, if you don't mind, let me.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, when we're talking about attendance, I think we need to provide a couple examples of why attendance is a struggle. We have students that are frequently in and out of the hospital, both for medical reasons, but also for mental health reasons. We have students that require a high level of supervision. They cannot be left home alone. So if a family has an appointment and that's the primary person that's going to be receiving them or putting them on the bus, they cannot be left alone. And so they have to make a hard decision. Do I go to the appointment and take my student with me, or do I send my student to school and chance the fact that I won't be home in time to receive them? So there's a whole litany of challenges that go into attendance. What Kevin said is accurate. We do want to focus on attendance, but we also want to focus on engagement when students are at school.
And then graduation.
And the graduation rate.
Graduation.
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah, so the graduation rate piece is the challenge because of the population of students that served in the SSD schools and programs, for most of our students, graduating by IEP goals is the most appropriate pathway for them. And currently in that system, any student graduating by IEP goals does not count as a graduate, which is why, as Kelly mentioned, we have a 27% graduation rate currently because those students are graduating by IEP goals, and that doesn't currently meet the DESE definition. And so the IEP team is the one making that decision of is it credits or goals. If you look at our students who are graduating on goals, they have lots of credits. They have many, many credits. And so they are still participating in the learning, but we think that that broadening interpretation is going to be a more fair metric for our district, knowing that if the student was outside of that SEB population that Kelly talked about earlier, if credits was the most likely fit for them, they probably wouldn't be in one of our SSD schools and instead be back in the partner district. And so recognizing on that continuum, the student being participating in learning at one of the SSD schools, it makes sense that graduating on IEP goals is probably the best fit for that student.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Just a quick question, and then I've got something a little bit longer. On page 8, the proposed target is 90% of graduates complete 60 hours or more of high quality work-based learning. Are you talking about before graduation or after?
Oh, good question. Prior to graduation. So
Prior
that would
to
be during the
graduation.
high school experience. So we'd be tracking that as they work their way through. That would be over the course of the 4 years. It doesn't all done during the senior year. But the idea is that would escalate as they work towards graduation, that there'll be some exposure that freshman, sophomore year, and then more and more as they move to senior year towards graduation.
Thank you. That wasn't clear on the slide.
Mhm.
Good. And then just general conversation. I think this is, the intubation waiver came out, like you said, a couple of years ago. I think that we are good candidates for this. I think this is a good use of it. I do like the idea that we're really looking at accountability and rigor, because I think it's possible not to make sure that those are part of it. I think those are very important if we're looking at different metrics of success, because the word we want is success. We're specialized for student success. So we want everyone to be successful at their optimal level. So I'd like to see that, and I do see it present in the plan. My question is the timeline. When are proposals due? And then what is the typical timeline before a district could be using the innovation waiver?
Yeah, so there isn't necessarily a cutoff because it could go to the State Board of Education anytime that they meet, which they meet 4 times a year.
Okay.
Our goal is to get it to them this summer is our goal. So we're working on getting kind of a bow on the plan. After we get all of that initial feedback and we adjust the plan based off the feedback, with the goal of getting it to the state in June, with the hopes of it going to State Board of Education around August is the hope.
Okay, thank you.
If I remember right, is it Missouri Schools for the Severely Handicapped? Is that the other one that is very similar to us?
Yes, the schools for the severely disabled, yes.
And are we working with this? I mean, it would seem that if we are the two schools like this in the state of Missouri, it would seem that if we propose something, it would be nice to have them also agreeing to this. If we talk to them.
That's a good point. So far, we've not included them as a part of our plan.
Well,
When you do an innovation plan, you have the option to do it as a standalone school district, or you can do it as a group of districts. The difference is that we are in an urban setting, where we have a lot of, especially the work-based learning component. There's a lot that we can do here where the schools for the severely disabled are spread throughout the state.
Right.
Some of them are in a pretty rural setting. So the things that we could do within our proposal and our plan may or may not be feasible in their setting. Our innovation team did talk about how this could be a really good framework for those schools if they choose that they want to adopt it and move to the same framework that we're offering. But what we don't want to do is focus on opportunities that exist in a rural setting at the detriment of what could be for the best interest of our students. So we really are focusing this plan on what's going to have the greatest impact for the students of St. Louis County. And that's really the lens that we're working through on this.
Okay, that makes sense.
I just have a quick comment. I really want to express thanks to Dr. Bolton for explaining previously about where we are as far as accreditation and how we're being affected. And I think that historical data might also play a huge part of that she's collected. There's no way we can be successful in this realm.
No.
And so to have an alternative plan to me is essential. And I really would like to commend your efforts and your committee's work on putting together a very solid plan. Well done.
What is the one plan that's been approved, innovation with?
The Success Ready Schools Network is the
Okay.
only one that's been approved, and that one is a conglomeration of 22 different school districts, and there's also some financial backing to that, and
I have a quick question. On page number 12, the charting the life course trajectory tools completed by 90% or more graduating seniors. So will you have the guardians and parents involved in that too? Okay, good.
Yes.
That's the priority for that process, is to engage the student and the family. Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
That's why we like the tool.
Yeah, I think I went through the class and I thought it was amazing. So I love that it will just be integrated, or it hopefully will be integrated into starting with freshmen.
We actually hope to start it younger.
The lens of this plan is K through 12.
Okay.
And so the idea is that we're aligning all this through. So we're thinking about post-secondary outcomes from the beginning of the student's educational experience through the end. Because like the work-based learning component, that can exist at the middle school level, that can exist at the elementary level. We just want to have that become a natural component of what we do. This is how we teach. This is how students learn, and this is how we develop school skills for them to be ready for what's next.
But I'm sure this is obvious, or the answer is probably obvious. The kindergarten charting the life course might look different than at 8th grade. And then
Absolutely.
okay.
And it will change, and it will ebb,
Right,
and it will
as the
flow.
kids, right, as they ebb and flow. Right. Thank you. Any other questions, sir?
Yes, K-12 or pre-K-12?
So for our schools and programs, we don't have early childhood special education as a part of our program. So that's why we were looking K-12.
So the only ECEs, or the only early childhood education students who are here are in the lab programs at North and South Tech?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clarity.
I think at the end of the day, really being able to provide our students with the opportunities for success is key. I think when you look at, the overall numbers of 23,000 students, roughly 3,500 of those students are the ones who are included in our APR calculation. So you talk about really just that disparities and what those numbers look like, and being able to provide success, I think, is key. So I believe the innovation waiver is a next step, first step for those pieces.
I like it. Stop judging us by our MAP scores. Always disagreed with that. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With our agenda. All right, next on our agenda is the 2024 extended school year ESY and summer programs. I know.
You know, I don't do well with change. Why did we?
No, I was gonna go up there and ask
Yeah,
her to
would
move
you
over
pull it
there,
back?
but they didn't.
Pull it
Thank
back
you.
over
Yes,
there.
I will. I'll do that for us, Dr. Cuneo. Good evening. My name is Wendy Pendergrass, Chief Academic Officer of Schools and Programs, and tonight I'm going to present about our extended school year and summer programs, provide the board an update of these programs and where we're at. So what is the difference between extended school year and the summer programs? Students who are eligible for extended school year are those who require extensive support with their IEPs, ongoing support with IEP goals, and actually the IEP team deems it necessary to qualify them for summer services where the team themselves discuss what kind of minutes are going to be needed for that child to learn over the summer to maintain their goal. It's not to increase goal, it is to maintain their goal to prevent regression. So that is extended school year, and special school district is obligated to provide that regardless if we do summer programs or not. If you remember several years ago, we had this little thing called COVID. We wanted to come up with an idea to kind of help our students close the gap with some of the learning that they had not had face-to-face, right? So we offered a summer program, really twofold, and hope to close some of that and then also to get more interest into ESY. Our families would often say the reasons why they weren't going to ESY is that it was a half-day program. They had to worry about daycare. They had to worry about camps. So it was our hope that by adding the summer program, we would also be able to increase our numbers for extended school year. So current salary for summer, currently we are in negotiations with the teacher union. So we're hoping the teacher level rate of pay will increase a little bit if it is approved by the board. Our COTAs, PTAs, our RBTs, teachers assistants and teacher aides based on negotiations last year will all make their hourly rate for extended school year and the summer programs. And then our nurses will make $43.50. We're trying to make that a little increase so we can make sure that our student nurses is the area that we have the most support with our students needing. If we don't have nurses available, some of our students can't access extended school year. So we're trying to make sure we recruit the best nurses. This year, we had 1,632 applicants for extended school year and summer programs. Typically, I have not seen that ever. So I do believe it is the hopes that what we did for our staff got them a little bit more interested in helping support our students over the summer. However, we're still in dire need of nurses. We do have, we may have to contract with some nursing agencies in order to have students come to ESY. By the numbers, so the students that are eligible, this slide and the next slide are broke down by partner districts. Those are the students that are current eligible based on our IEP count, pulling a report from Phoenix. When we send out about this time of year, January, February, March, we send out letters to families reminding them that their student qualifies for ESY and are they interested? So that is our projected number of those families that have either contacted their IEP chair or sent the letter back in. And then of course, this year we've added the decline. Now that is subject to change. But that is the districts based on the numbers. And then the second slide would be the second half of the district by alphabetical order. This would be students. You also have in a separate handout, I broke down by region what your school districts, when your ESY programs and when your partner districts programs, times and dates are available. That is in the second handout. For our SSD schools and programs and our early childhood, those are our current numbers. This year, our students at Bridges, we did not have any student at Bridges qualify for extended school year. In the past, we thought that we would add them as a site and then provide staffing for that, but we do not have a student this year that have that. Typically, all of our students for purchase of service, if you remember those contracts, most of our agencies that we support with run a summer program and those students maintain. That's why those numbers don't change. So for the schools, we have our ESY program that will go from 8 to 12:30. We also will offer breakfast and lunch. And then our summer programs in our SSD schools will go 12:30 to 2:30. And that program that we use is a combination of Summer Journey, and the program is based on continuing on with literacy math, but doing it from a fun report. We wanted it to be more like a camp-like learning activity, so the kids had a different opportunity than just paper, pencil, lectures, stuff like that. Actually build a drone if they possibly could. So what is coming up next? As I had said earlier, we're going to provide breakfast and lunch. Afternoon numbers we are seeing are a little bit lower than what we would hope. We're going to make phone calls to our families. What we want to see is basically do a survey and really understand, is the summer program worth the students coming in and making the progress that they need? ESY is a non-negotiable. We'll always do ESY, but we're wondering, and we're going to be watching and asking, is that summer program really something that we need to continue? Or are there other opportunities? Know that students in our partner districts, we provide staff to support them in the summer school programs that happen in our partner districts. So they attend their extended school year, but then we also provide the extra support. Dr. Yates and Dr. Moore continue to support the hiring the staff to support those students in the different programs that are out there. Continue to collaborate with partner districts, making sure that our programs, both ESY and summer learning programs, are in the same schools, that we don't have our ESY programs in one building and then our summer programs in the other. That causes difficulty with transportation. Of course, finalize staffing. The only area that we need staff right now are nursing. We have plenty of staff in other areas. Of course, continue to work with transportation. And then the history that our families want is communicate, communicate, communicate. Make sure that they understand when schools start. Make sure they understand when the buses come. Make sure they understand what extended school year progress is being made, what is not with the goals. So we will continue to do that with our families. Questions?
I want to go back to our summer programs, okay?
Mhm.
We started that with COVID, and because if I remember right, also, there was a lot of people being sued out of a New York group because they weren't getting the services, and so they had this universal thing. And we did it because we thought it was a good idea, but we also didn't want to get sued, which we didn't get sued. But if I remember right, and we had an evaluation of that program at the end, and it was outrageously positive.
Yes.
I mean,
The families that do attend like the opportunity for their students to attend. Absolutely, in the summer
could we
program.
get that evaluation to some of the people that said they aren't going? I mean, the decline, when I looked at the declining, the one that really stood out to me was Hazelwood.
Mhm.
I mean,
What is happening and what our two biggest competitors to what I continually hear of why families don't want to send is, one, they don't want the fight. They want a break from school. They want their students to have a nice summer and enjoy and possibly get involved in camps. For two, camps fill up quick. So they want to, if their children get accepted into a camp, which are typically 7 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock at night. So it's a lot different than what we offer in extended school year and summer programs. And it's a different type of activity. And then they just want to break. They just want to break.
And if I'm thinking about summer schools like in HSD, their HSD summer school actually ends at like 1 o'clock as well. So that is extremely difficult for parents, where versus some districts end at like 2:33.
I mean, the ESY, then going to summer camp, that would be ideal. And I love the fact that we are offering lunch and breakfast. No, this, I just remember the evaluation that we had afterwards, because there was a big deal. Is this worth the money? Is this worth the money? And then we had an evaluation that was done afterwards that said it was worth the money.
Mhm.
I think that it would be nice to be able to give it to those districts. The people liked it when we did it before. Maybe show, I mean, to me, that's great advertising.
The testimonial.
So your ask is to get the evaluation to the districts.
Yeah, to the districts. Because it went beautifully. If I remember right, we had like an 80-90% approval rating where people loved this and wanted it to continue. So I thought it would be a good idea, to get it to the districts, let them see it.
Yeah. Dr. Yates and Dr. Moore do a nice job working with our partner districts, making sure the schedules and calendars come out correctly, being able to communicate. We're kind of at the whim of partner districts when they're planning. We tend to plan summer programs a little bit faster than some of our partner districts. So making sure that they communicate with families about that, and then also help support the summer programs. ESY, it's an old hat for us. We know how to do that. Figuring out calendars and what programs need to support it and whose students are going to what programs takes a lot of work.
Yeah, but that summer program people loved it. I still remember that evaluation.
I have a quick question. Just to restate the obvious, lunch and breakfast are paid for by SSD, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
perfect.
There are some grants that I think we're eligible for that we work or try to get, but I'm not sure how much. I know we are responsible for some of the cost.
That's amazing. I love that. I don't want that to change.
Which, by
And
the way, for families that don't, for our students that come to ESY and leave, we do have box lunches that go home with families. We offer that for some of our families as well in the schools. Yes.
Love it. Love it. Keep it. And then buses, we provide transportation to our schools and then if you're in ESY in like Parkway, is bus transportation also included in that? Or
Transportation is a related service. If you qualify for transportation as a related service, we provide it. If you do not, no, we do not provide transportation as a related service.
Gotcha. So if you take the bus with all the neighborhood kids, then you wouldn't get. Okay, good to know. Good to know. So, but for our,
Yes.
okay. And I agree with Dr. Cuneo, get that parent testimonials out there because it's an amazing program. I agree. Any other questions?
I have a couple, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm thrilled about the positive reviews from the past. My questions are more sort of where summer school and ESY intersect with our budget because we're really looking hard at our budget. So I'm looking back at slide 4, and you're hoping for, there's a potential for a different salary. We'll see what happens with negotiations and all those things. Does this include, are teachers paid for planning time as well?
Yes, they get a certain amount of hours prior to ESY starting and after ESY ends. They have, we also pay a few teachers to come in and set up folders. So all of our teachers have the same experience when you have your students' goals, you have your plans, you have all of that. So yes, teachers are paid to support students prior to it starting. And then when they come to set up their classroom for orientation, we provide all of that. We pay for all of that.
Great, great. And then are these numbers, since you have increased interest, are these numbers within our approved FY24 budget?
We are looking very, very carefully at the amount of students that are qualifying and attending. Of course, we base our numbers on those students that qualify based on our reports. We've got an overwhelming amount of applications that came in. So it was nice to have the staff and the staff grid supported. Now that we know what students are coming in, we're taking a very fine look at making sure that our classrooms are supported, our students are supported, and that if we need to move staff accordingly throughout the district to support other classrooms, we can.
And we'll receive state reimbursement for summer school. Is that
For
correct?
ESY,
For ESY?
yes, we do. For summer programs, we applied for a grant. We did get accepted to the grant. However, the students have to be in attendance a certain amount of the time. So we will see how much we get back for summer.
Okay, thank you.
It would also be nice if we could get some from the POS into this on a purely cynical basis. We pay a small fortune to some of our POSs during the summer for their summer program.
That is through, well, know that that is through the IEP team, and the IEP team their current location is a private separate. So we wouldn't look at moving them for summer. We would want to
Just
support
saying
them
that
where they're at. Yeah.
I remember what.
But what it could do is support a child moving back to a least restrictive
could.
environment. That's exactly what it could do.
And then one other question. I know, relationships are important for student learning. Do you see a lot of SSD staff applying for these positions, and are many students with the same teacher that they've had all year, or the teacher that they'll have next year? Or is it kind of a mishmash?
I can say yes and no. In some situations and in some districts, teachers like to work in the summer. I would say in our SSD schools primarily, and in some of our partner districts, and Dr. Moore and Dr. Yates can speak more to that. They do have different staff. So it's learning new routines, it's learning new staff, it's learning new supports. I think that's where some of the communication breaks down, is that families are assuming that it's going to be the same teacher that comes in that provides the support during the school year. And when they get there and realize it's a brand new team, and we haven't done an extensive enough job introducing ourselves, letting her know who's going to support their kids. I think that's where some of the communication breaks down.
Well, it's good to know. Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much. Last on our agenda, we have the 2.04 MSIP monitoring report presentation.
Good evening, President Potroff, Board of Education, Dr. Macklin. My name is Molly Bolton, and I'm the Executive Director of Teaching, Learning, Accountability. And you can't get away from a meeting without a presentation from me. So last but not least, I have with me tonight Dr. Matt Trauber, and we are going to talk about the last of our MSIP monitoring reports for this year. Just a quick reminder, the purpose of these reports helps fill a requirement from DESE on that we monitor and report out on our programs regularly. And it really is just going to inform you of how our programs are doing on that ongoing basis. So we do have quite a few tonight. We have curriculum, employee wellness, facilities and grounds, family and community engagement, or FACE, federal programs, food services, legal services and compliance, and safety and security response.
Good evening. What you see here on this slide is just a explainer of the summary table of results that you'll see in the report and in these slides. So just one thing to point out, that the results in that middle column are color coded. So if you see a result that's in blue, that means it exceeded the target, or if you see a directional arrow in blue, that means that that trend is headed in the direction that we would prefer. And the opposite of that is if a result is in orange, it's either below the target or it's trending in a direction other than that we would want it to trend. In the report, there is a column on the right for supporting details. And that column will include information such as details about a measure that's used or an explanation for a result. However, that column does not appear in the slides that you're going to see today. So if you want to refer back to that column, it can provide you with additional information. So I'm going to quickly overview the measures that are used to monitor each of these programs for the purpose of this exercise. I will highlight just a few results, but if you have a question about a specific result that we don't talk about, let us know. So the first program is curriculum. So there are 3 indicators used to monitor the curriculum program. The first 2 just pertain to us conducting our curriculum reviews on the schedule that we lay out. So one pertains to our SSD separate schools, and the second pertains to CTE. And then the third indicator is a measure of satisfaction among those who participate in the curriculum review process. And that has been gradually increasing each year. So employee wellness is the second program. It also has 3 indicators. The first indicator just speaks to the extent to which our staff are participating in the broad variety of wellness programming that we offer. The second indicator is EAP utilization. And for this one, we are looking to have our staff utilize our EAP services at a level that exceeds the industry standard. So as a reference point, I think the industry standard in 2023 was 7.9%. So we substantially exceed that standard. The third indicator here comes from our employee engagement surveys. There is a question that specifically asks staff about whether they perceive SSD offering wellness opportunities. And this most recent year, that result exceeded the target, and the agreement rate was considerably high at 83%. So there are 2 indicators we use to monitor facilities and grounds. The first indicator is simply a measure of efficiency. So it looks at whether routine work is being completed within 5 days, whereas the second indicator is based on our engagement survey, and it solicits perceptions from staff at SSD schools and buildings about whether they perceive that their buildings and sites are in good condition. So that has increased over the last 2 years. Family and community engagement is a new report. We previously did a report for the PETA department. We have retooled that with the reorganization for FACE. So all of these indicators are new. So there's an indicator of family outreach, community outreach, and then 2 indicators that assess the extent to which our stakeholders perceive benefit in the FACE services that they access. So these indicators are sort of in line with the model of the program. Just in the last couple of years, with respect to the stakeholder benefit, agreement with those survey items has been exceptionally high at 95% and 93%, respectively. And we are also, with that program, members of that program are also interfacing with community agencies at a high degree. I think the number of agencies in total that they might want to interface with at this point is around 70. And as of last year, they interfaced with 54.
That's great.
So federal programs has a number of indicators. The first indicator is a key one. It just looks at whether that program is meeting the requirements with respect to compliance and reporting, which there are quite a few. A second indicator, so the federal programs, one thing they oversee is homeless programs. So that second indicator examines whether we are establishing transportation for homeless students rapidly. So we try to keep that at 2 days or less. So haven't quite hit that target, but we did improve last year. The third and fourth indicators connect to Title I academic services. Specifically, these are the STAR assessment that all of our students take. For reading, that is a very strong result from 2023 with over 63% of students meeting the target. Decisions have been made to provide Title I services for reading only this year, moving into next year. However, all of our students continue to get assessed via the STAR assessment in math. I think there was a question about that. So even if we're no longer offering Title IV math, we'll still have math results via that assessment that we can review. So food service assessed in a couple different ways. There are two survey indicators based on a student survey. They assess basically if students are satisfied with the food and satisfied with the service that they receive in the cafeteria. There is a third indicator that looks at compliance based on routine audits. All those corrective actions from 2019 have been addressed. I think the next audit occurs in fiscal year 2025. And then finally, there's also a routine audit of food safety, and we're at 99% to 100% of those. We did receive a question about whether students are surveyed on foods they would like to see in the cafeteria. On that survey, there is an item that asks for their opinion there, and some students do answer that item. So those data are available to review about the types of foods that students would like to see that aren't currently available. Legal services and compliance is a report that we just started offering last year. It has more indicators than many of our reports. The first three indicators are processes that are directly managed by our legal and compliance department. So these are due processes, child complaints, and mediations. So basically, we're looking at the extent to which the outcomes of those processes are perceived as being favorable to SSD. The fourth indicator is tiered monitoring. You'll commonly hear this referred to as file review. Districts go through it in different cohorts, on a 3-year cycle. We exceeded our target in school year 2023. You'll notice one action in the report that speaks to this indicator. A work group was formed this school year to develop more formal and standard processes for providing guidelines and supporting that tiered monitoring process. So I think whatever that committee is implemented will start next year. And then the final two indicators for this one just speaks to IEP compliance, basically, the extent to which our IEPs are being held on time and the extent to which our evaluations are being conducted within the expected timeline of 60 days. So there was a question that we received, Director Suda, I think that you sent this one in about a supplemental table in the report. So there was, this would be on the third page of the report. There was 4 of the 7 districts that went through tiered monitoring this past school year were found out of compliance on the indicator that speaks to whether IEPs were held within 365 days. So I did touch base with our legal and compliance folks about that one. So I guess one point to make first is that only one IEP has to be found out of compliance on an indicator for that district to be found out of compliance. So you could, as a district, you could submit 25 IEPs, and just if one of those missed the timeline, inheritance deadline, you'd be found out of compliance. But there is some speculation about that result for this year and why it was worse than those from prior years. So the speculation is that it's at least in part due to a combination of two things. One being a new DESE compliance reviewer, and the second piece is likely to be paperwork submission errors on our part. So it could be just those administrative factors. So it looks like we neglected to submit cover pages for a prior year's IEP. And normally reviewers will remind us of that, but this newer reviewer did not. So there's some lessons learned there that moving forward, we just need to make sure that we submit all the documentation that's required. And that work group that I referenced earlier, I think is going to be developing standard guidance to ensure that happens. But that result does connect to the fifth indicator in the report, which is on-time IEPs for sure. So we've had annually over 5% of IEPs that are not completed within that 1-year window. So it's definitely something that we can continue to emphasize and support. Finally, the last program on the agenda tonight is safety and security response. So it has 4 indicators. Trends look pretty good for all these indicators. One is the annual safety audit in our SSD buildings. 2 of these are conducted each year at all of our buildings. So the indicator just looks at how many exceptions are there. So how many critical life safety exceptions are our safety team identifying that need to be addressed. We also look at non-student related work injuries that occur in SSD schools and trying to establish environmental conditions that minimize the possibility of those. The third indicator just speaks to the operational status of our security cameras, making sure that those are continually operational. They have been at a 98% level. And then finally, the last one speaks to our emergency preparedness, specifically emergency drills that we complete. That result was a little bit better in 2022-23, but some improvements have been made. And so far this year in 23-24, even though it's not shown, we are at 100% on our emergency preparedness drills being complete successfully and on time. Are there any questions that we can answer?
I have a question to somebody. I do. I always
Go
do.
first.
I'll always have a question.
too. You go first.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the overview and all of the supporting materials. I do want to understand a little bit more about why math student growth was dropped from federal programs.
I will do my best to explain that. So I think last year we had a vacancy in the Title I math position. And in the course of that vacancy and conversations with schools, it was just determined that they felt it was a better use of resources to focus solely on reading. Would you add anything to that?
The other thing I would say is we were looking for a person certified in secondary math, which is pretty difficult to find. You know, and especially when you're looking at a Title I position, so it's not even just a straight I'm teaching math type of position. So it was posted several times with no viable applicants.
Have we looked at the impact of that on our student success?
Well, we continue to monitor. Actually, our MAP scores for if you'll remember from our last report for math were way higher without that support. So they have continued to grow and look at supporting in other ways.
Great. Math is a challenge statewide.
Absolutely it is.
So I want to make sure that we're supporting it. If we're not monitoring it through Title I, that it's absolutely getting the support that our students need.
And as Matt said previously, you know, we do monitor both reading and math scores. We benchmark 3 times throughout the year. So we are constantly looking at those scores to make sure that we're trending in the right direction.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
My question was, on the last slide, the work injury. So there were 66 injuries, but only 33 were medical. What's an injury that's not medical?
So part of our work injury reporting process encourages staff to report if they sustain some sort of injury, but it doesn't require medical attention. So they wouldn't need to file, a claim on that injury, but it gives us sort of an indication of whether events like that are occurring.
Okay, so they didn't need to go to urgent care. Something like that was my question. Any other questions?
I just had a quick question. I'm sorry. I was looking at the food survey and like in 2022, like 200 took the survey versus 170 kids took it. Okay.
Part of that is North Tech.
Got it. That makes sense.
Part of
Thank
that
you.
is.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Oh, and on the food, sorry. No matter what Tommy says, do not add caffeinated sodas.
I think there
To the
are
lunch
some
program.
some federal guidelines that we would not be doing that.
Thank you, because I bet he's like Pepsi on his. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, please don't. Just for the legal services and compliance, could we get a breakdown by district at some point for the specific data that was cited here? Thank you.
Is it for of those 6 indicators, is there a specific indicator that you're most
So
concerned with?
specifically the IEP meetings, but also the broader indicator. So you said it ties into, for example, average percentage of successful indicators in compliance among districts undergoing self-assessments. And what was the other one? the very last one, on-time IEP processes. So
So one thing to think about is, all the districts are broken into 3 cohorts. So that would only be a few districts that would be reported out on that indicator.
right, we've seen previous years where there are some discrepancies between the districts, and so I'm really curious to see what this cohorts are, but if you wouldn't mind then including our data from the other cohorts from the most recently available data. I realize that's from 5 previous years. I'm curious to see that because I think that was fairly informative.
We can provide a breakout of those last 2 indicators, which are not part of tiered monitoring per se, if that would be helpful.
Thank you.
I would like to see also under legal services and compliance. Do we have a listing of opposing attorneys on the proposed mediations that do not result in agreed upon order?
Say that one more time.
I'd be curious to find out. Are there certain attorneys that if we enter into, we never get an agreed upon mediation or course of actions? I'm sure that we would be able to have that.
That's not part of the data set that I work with for this report, but we could kind of go to the data and probably plug that in after the fact, if it'd be helpful.
I think that would truly be interesting to have, especially when we get into the executive sessions.
Any other questions or concerns?
So.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Macklin would like to say a few words.
I want to thank everyone for the presentation tonight. Truly, you can see the hard work that went into it, and so we appreciate those pieces. We also had a chance to attend our student awards banquet last week, and so really appreciate those pieces. I see Tim Eby was in the audience tonight, so very grateful for those pieces with SEF, and then also our communications. I do want to read just a card here. I promised Tim Smith that I would read a card that he wrote to the Board of Education, who was an honoree here of the Dr. Westbury Scholarship. So Tim Smith wrote, "Dear Board of Education, thank you for recognizing me as a recipient of the James Westbury Board of Education Scholarship this year. When I started high school, I never thought that I would have the chance to earn a scholarship. Not even did I think that I would make it to my senior year.
Wow.
But I am in the running for the scholarship and have won the scholarship. I want to say thank you. I'm very grateful for everyone who spent time making this happen. This has truly lifted the financial burden from myself and my family. I appreciate everything that you guys have done, Board of Education. Sincerely, Tim Smith." So just to really put in perspective, truly what it really means and for those pieces on a daily basis and the avenues that pathways you make for students is important.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, motion. Meeting